Welcome to the American Institute of Healthcare Professionals video on the subtle ways of the devil. And this is primarily meant for our Christian counseling program, but also for anyone who's interested in Christian spirituality and also in moral guidance. And maybe this video can be pastoral in some extent to some of you who need some guidance and are looking for spiritual advice. Now, when we look at how the devil can slowly break us down, I think the biggest thing to look at is temptation. The devil does not need very grand schemes to capture our soul. I mean, even the betrayal of Judas or the fictional betrayal of Lancelot, these were not immediate events, but they were something that gradually occurred. They were a weakening of character over a long period of time. So the devil utilizes temptation to slowly erode our foundations. And I think C.S. Lewis's book, The Screw Tape Letters, really captures that. How Screw Tape, when he's writing about the individual he was assigned to, the man that he was assigned to, he works through just the little things, looking for just any crack to find, just to weaken, and then to expose that crack and make it larger until it becomes a rift. And then it starts tearing other parts of our spiritual well-being away. So it's important then for us to understand how this occurs through the occasion of sin, or being around sin and not being around the spiritual. Various earthly and flesh-focused endeavors can weaken our spiritual sight. Minor spiritual vanities and a lack of spirituality over time weaken the soul and make us look for things of this realm as opposed to the next. Again, temptation is the fundamental form of demonic presence in the world. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 27 states, "Do not give the devil a foothold." So just that little foothold, just like what C.S. Lewis mentioned, is the way that gradual breaking down of our spiritual foundation occurs. Despite temptation, though, despite our fallen nature and our inclination to sin, we need to stay strong with God's grace. But these things, these natural weaknesses within us and these external forces push us away from that grace that we need so much. So that while God is still there, our antenna are not prone to hear his voice as well, because we have soiled ourselves with this world and with sin. And a lot of times individuals who start to fall away from God feel that God has abandoned them. The fact is, we cannot hear him as well because we have allowed temptation and the little things in life to gradually push us away from God. God doesn't push us away in itself. Few things to consider: our conscience. Is our conscience sound and properly formed? Remember, a good conscience will follow the commandments and are free of defect in that regard. So following the commandments through a good conscience, even if we break them, the good conscience will nag at us and never allow us to walk away from God permanently. It will always call us back with that guilt. And that guilt is a good thing, because it acknowledges that we did something wrong, and that's the purpose of conscience. Now, our lower inclinations is due to our broken nature, due to the sin of Adam, and it makes us more inclined to passions and bad habits that develop over time in the subconscious level that can weaken virtue and good habit. So we have to be constantly controlling and praying to God for grace to fight this internal struggle within ourselves. Pride and humility. We need humility, but how many times is pride overtaking humility in our daily life? Pride is the capital and root of all sin. It is what pushed Lucifer to rebel. So humility is critical in a healthy spiritual life because it always acknowledges our brokenness and the need of God. while pride dismisses that need. Finally, how are we in our daily life in terms of spirituality? Are we looking for false idols of happiness in that life instead of God and our permanent home in heaven? So we can mistakenly seek out these things. The will is confused, and it looks for these things that are not good for us, that are just temporary, and definitely not important for salvation. And then sometimes, even though benign in themselves, they still take away from God. So these things can gradually break us down. A bad conscience, our lower inclinations, pride, and false idols of happiness that lead us away from God. And when we look at the moral life, the biggest thing is virtue, vice, and the capital sins. Virtues are infused at baptism into our soul in themselves. And these virtues include faith, hope, and love. And then the moral virtues of prudence, fortitude, justice, and temperance. And these virtues, these seven, help the soul navigate the immoral waters that we encounter in life. Prudence helps us to discern. Fortitude helps us to carry through. Justice helps us to see right and wrong. And temperance helps us to control those lower passions. And those virtues, those habits, are so critical to our moral life. But the vices, in contrast, are habitual actions that are contrary to the virtues, and they cause an imbalance to the soul. And these vices, over time, can corrupt the soul. Maybe not in one day, but just through little things. Pride, the principal root of all sin, the first of the major capital sins or vices. It erodes humility, which is the way to Jesus. It can be used by Satan even in the most spiritual individuals. Spiritual people can become proud of their own spirituality without even knowing it sometimes. Anger can easily be misplaced and misused to break a person's character. Envy can lead one away from what God has given someone and to make one want more and to covet what is not rightfully theirs. And that envy can gradually make us resent God for what we are not given, and we're totally focused on what we want. Sloth tears the soul away from God because we are torn away from our duties. We become lazy in our spirituality. We become lazy in fulfilling our daily obligation to God and our neighbor. Lust. Lust distorts the soul away. Lust distorts true love. Lust makes us see individuals that we are supposed to love as sexual objects in themselves. And it makes us a slave to the flesh. And it makes us mired and stuck in the mud of life so that we're unable to see the purity of spirituality. Remember, Jesus says, the pure of heart shall see God. Well, lust tears that away. So how are we able to see God in this life, to be spiritual and so forth? Gluttony disposes one to overindulge in food and drunk and weakens our spiritual senses just like lust does. And again, it mires us. It doesn't look for simplicity. It looks for more. Same with greed. It perverts the soul and the body's needs and promotes excess, especially in terms of excess in the needs of ourselves over others. And not only that, but putting our spiritual needs well beyond these material things themselves. So those are the seven capital sins: pride, anger, envy, sloth, lust, gluttony, and greed. And they slowly erode the soul. So here's some little things to remember in our daily life. Be mindful of how the devil can utilize fear. How many times are we afraid in our life and we forget to turn to God and we lose that trust? Discontent. Discontent again is associated with envy and greed. Sufferings. Sometimes our sufferings can be seen as curses instead of chances to offer up to God, and we become resentful to God for those sufferings. Unanswered prayers. Sometimes unanswered prayers can lead us to anger to God, towards God. And in those unanswered prayers, we begin to question our faith. False teachers and misinterpretations. We need to constantly be alert for individuals who will try to fool us and betray us, whether they're within the faith or outside of the faith. These types of misinterpretations can lead us away from God and truth itself. And disobedience. Many times with pride, we disobey. We look to form our own way of doing things instead of God's way. So on the contrary, hold strongly to God's will over our own will. Seek humility over pride. Continue to focus on your daily duty, which involves prayer, sometimes fasting. Indulge oneself in the sacraments, especially Eucharist and reconciliation in terms for Catholics. Utilize Scripture in your daily life. Don't become foreign to it. Utilize sacramentals in your daily defense. Don't be afraid to grasp a crucifix or a cross in your hand to pray to God for grace. Also, look for things that excite the soul towards piety and goodness, good company as opposed to occasions of sin. Remember to have emphasis on your spiritual hygiene as a concept. And as a concept, I mean, we have physical hygiene, and we pretty much are very strict with these types of physical hygienes, brushing your teeth, bathing, going to the doctor. Well, your spiritual hygiene involves cleaning of your soul, feeding your soul, going to church, worshiping God. And again, also to maintain that closeness to God, Christ, Mary, the angels, especially Saint Michael and all the saints, so that they can keep us closer to God and intercede for us before God, because they are our heavenly friends. So a close relationship with Christ himself, who is God, to make Christ our best friend. So these are things that we want to hold strong to prevent these little erodements from occurring within our spiritual life itself. We are AIHCP, and we do offer a Christian counseling certification. Our link is below. Our phone number is 330-652-7776, and our email is info@aihcp.org. I'd like to thank you for listening, and also have a good day.